Alright, hello everyone, and welcome back to another video, with my mic set properly this time, of contemporary examples of government failure in Australia. So this is part of Area Study 1, it's the very last dot point. It's an area where people often kind of forget about it, or they do it at the start of the year, they forget about it by the end of the year. It's about all the times that old mate ScoMo over here, like that way, boop, 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 tries to do things to better the economy that actually makes the allocation of resources worse, potentially makes living standards worse because of it. So it's not just ScoMo, also some of his predecessors, but we're going to be looking at four recent examples. There are way more than this, but I like to look at these four because a lot of them are current. I feel like being really current really gives you a good push in front of like the examiner's eyes, looking at, wow, this person really knows their stuff, rather than just going with the same things that everyone always goes with. So let's jump into it. So ScoMo can turn this frown, that's just going to stay a frown because we're going to be criticizing him, but wouldn't it be nice if he was a little bit happier? So some key tips. So government failure is all about where the government's intervention into the free market has led to an allocation of resources becoming worse. So it makes us less allocatively efficient because the way that resources are being allocated are not maximizing society's living standards. It's not creating the combination of goods and services that society wants most, and it doesn't maximize their satisfaction. So although there are many examples to use, we're actually going to use four. One I threw in there as an extra one, honestly, because there was a meme that went with it, but that are very easy to explain in exam situations. Let's get straight into the first one. The first one is the NBN. So the National Broadband Network, depending on where you live, the NBN is either amazing or it is terrible. And that is thanks to many different things the government has done. So in 2007, when the Labor government pledged to install high-speed internet, it was meant to be fiber optic cable to the property. It's very different. Like beforehand, we were using the copper phone lines for internet. This is before your time, but many people had dial-up, and then we got regular broadband, which is kind of and then we went to get NBN, which is going to be quick, modern, for the future. It was going to give us great speeds, and so it was saying it would give us speeds of up to 100 megabits per second, and would be later upgraded all the way up to 1 gigabit per second. So if you're lucky enough to live in Bacchus Marsh, where I live in the country, we have fiber to the property. So this internet that I'm using right now is 100 megabits per second. If I cannot like download something in the time it takes me to make a sandwich, I'm upset because our internet's insanely fast. Never have lag in games, etc. People can stream things in all different rooms. We can have video calls going. It's brilliant. But apparently the government at the time was just like, you know what? Why should we do that thing that's both cheap and effective? Why don't we change this to be fiber to the node or the interchange? So there's interchanges that then go out to all the properties. Let's have fiber go to that interchange, and then from that interchange, have less efficient copper go to the properties, which is both more expensive and not as fast. It could only achieve around, usually at a minimum, 25 megabits per second, and that's what most people were stuck with. It also had, like, fiber is relatively lossless in terms of the speed, and copper loses it as it goes along it. So they did that. It got rolled out for many, many years. It was constantly delayed, costing more and more. So over time, it's just costing more and more dollars. These are not good dollar signs. Costing more and more delays, etc. And now the current Morrison government in the October 2020 budget has pledged $4.5 billion to upgrade the copper network to fiber optic cable to the household for millions of households. So essentially, the current 2020 Morrison government has been like, oh, that 2007 idea was pretty good. Why don't we do that and cancel out what was done here that we paid billions of dollars to do? And so now billions of dollars could have been allocated anywhere else, literally like anywhere else that could have benefited living standards. We could have had, like, they're saying they need to do this now because of the pandemic. Everyone's on the internet at home. Everyone needs it. It's an essential service, basically, and it's not good enough at the moment. Well, it would have been if originally we went with this initial plan, but because we didn't, now billions are being spent. That 4.5 billion, that wouldn't have needed to be spent at all if they went with the original plan. And can you think of what $4.5 billion could do? Like, that could be infrastructure projects, that could be welfare benefits, that could be school funding. And all these things would greatly benefit the economy. It would make living standards much better. But because we're trying to fix up previous things, it's an example of government failure. Resources have not been allocated in a way that maximize society's living standards. So now, because apparently this is how I find out about any news in government policy in 2020, whenever the government announces anything, Simpsons pages on Facebook make jokes about it. So these are some of my favorites. Bear with me. So there are two ways to deliver fibre to the property: the Labor way and the Liberal Party way. And then Bart says, isn't that just the Labor way? Yes, but decades later and exponentially more expensive. Haha, laughs at the government's expense. This is why it's government failure. And then the second one, ye gods, the NBN is ruined. But what if Labor 2009 policies? That's right. Why don't we just use policies from a decade ago that were effective to fix that government failure that shouldn't have existed in the first place? Now, let's get on to the next criticizing of the government. JobKeeper subsidies. Now, bear with me on this one. This is me kind of like going rogue on my own because like this hasn't been in any publication yet, but I truly believe this is a great example of government failure and would be effective in an exam response. So arguably JobKeeper has made the distribution of resources worse by giving life support to businesses which will cease to exist when subsidies are removed. And this has been talked about in the media a bit about zombie businesses, which, as I've said before, is my single favorite piece of economic terminology that has ever existed. So this is proven by the current surge in unemployment expected to occur as the JobKeeper payments are reduced in October 2020. It's happening right now. I believe they were guessing overnight or something like 360,000 jobs would be lost based on the reduction of JobKeeper by, I think it was about $300 per person. And this will occur again in March when the payments cease to exist at all. So without the subsidies, many businesses would have been forced to take efficiency-seeking measures to remain profitable, and many who have lost their jobs would have been forced to reskill and become more employable in the areas of skill shortages. So yeah, if they didn't have these subsidies, a lot of businesses would have closed, and they would have closed sooner. But many businesses would have also pivoted. So they could have, like you see the way a lot of businesses have pivoted in the first place. Like a lot have gone into mask making, hand sanitizer, etc., making the things that are needed in a pandemic. Many other businesses have gone completely online because they realize that that's a better use of their resources right now. Some businesses have just lived on JobSeeker and barely operated, and basically were just leeching taxpayer money, and the government was giving it to them. And that makes the allocation of resources far worse because we are not producing anywhere near our productive capacity because of that, and we're unlikely to in the near future. And these people who are getting JobKeeper could actually be contributing by working in an area where they need labor, but they are able to just continue like getting paid a wage to not work. And it was a fairly, like some people were getting more money than they would get in their normal job. Like some people were getting $1,500 to not work. I get less than that to work right now. So like, that's insane to me. And so that's a massive, like this money could have been distributed in such different ways to be more effective and potentially benefit the economy. But because it created such a situation where businesses could exist but not really operate, it meant the government was spending billions of dollars without actually having to have a benefit from it. And therefore it has had the opposite effect. It doesn't stimulate the economy, it just kind of puts it on life support. So example of this, I love these lazy JobKeeper days. It's October Tobias, and then he's freaked out because he's about to lose his job. And that is very, very scary because now, rather than laying on the couch drinking beers, he's going to have to get up and find a job, which there aren't many at the moment. And there will continue to not be many for a while. Sidebar, if you're a VCE student and you've been seeing the government tell you to take a gap year to become a fruit picker in regional Australia, do not do that. The government's saying, well, They're saying you can find love if you do it. Do not do it. It's terrible conditions. There are quotas involved. People get worked like crazy. They live in insanely poor conditions. Basically, you get taken advantage of. You're basically slave labor in these situations. There are many different instances where there are claims of like harassment, both sexual, verbal, physical, by these farmers taking advantage of migrants that they normally get to pick these fruits because they need it to maintain their visa. The government's trying to make it sound like this, like you can go and live in the tropics and pick fruit. Yeah, there's a reason that they can't fill those jobs, because they were getting people who were desperate to have a visa to do it before. Just heads up, don't believe everything. But also don't believe conspiracy theories. They are crazy. Next up is kind of more a general one. This is the like extra one that made the fourth that we're going to do. A lot of people go with the minimum wage because it's easy to explain. It's not really like it's contemporary because it's always relevant, but it's a weird one because it is government failure, but I'm also in support of it existing. So I'm in support of minimum wage as it helps maintain basic living standards for so many people. The reason why we have a minimum wage in Australia is because it allows people to stay out of poverty, because even on the minimum wage, you're close to relative poverty. But due to a high minimum wage, many businesses have closed production in Australia and moved offshore to employ cheaper labor elsewhere. And that's an issue because it means that like we create a lot of structural unemployment in Australia. It leads to less jobs available for lower skilled workers in Australia and contributes to higher rates of structural unemployment and poverty. So for example, there are businesses like Cotton On, and Cotton On's a really like socially responsible company, but they design all their clothing in Australia, but they produce it in China, Bangladesh, and India. And what do all those three places have in common? They have cheap wages. And that gives them a lot of motivation to go and employ people over there. And it means that we are never going to be able to allocate our resources fully effectively in Australia because we are going to be looking for cheaper labor elsewhere. And then our last example is about investing in coal-powered energy. So if you have been studying economics in Australia since 2016, they have taken environmental policy off of their study design. The reason for that is for a long period of time, the government hasn't really had much environmental policy, so they can't really examine you on something that doesn't exist. That's why this is crazy. So we are in a point in time where we have done so much damage to the environment. Their pollution is insane. And one of the big differences of people being in lockdown is we've noticed that there's less pollution happening because that people can work from home, etc., and that's fine. But in this most recent budget, so October 6th, came out 2 days ago, the government has pledged an unspecified level of funding towards replacing key components of the Vales Power Point station on the New South Wales Central Coast. And so this is a coal-powered energy plant, like they make coal-powered energy. And they found that this has increased its dangerous fine particle pollution by 3,000% over the last 6 years and 181% last year. And it's also due to close in 9 years. So they're giving millions of dollars to something that damages the environment and is going to close in 9 years. Coal we have a limited amount of and obviously cannot use forever, and it's incredibly dangerous for the environment, greenhouse emissions, etc. Damages our natural resources. So obviously this funding could have been allocated to investing in renewable energy sources, as this pollution could degrade our natural resources significantly over the coming years. So this could have been more subsidies for solar panels, etc., hydroelectric plants, wind turbines, all these like clean forms of energy that could have been invested in that would make our allocation of resources better. But we invested in coal, which is going to damage the environment and eventually run out. There aren't really many words. So investing in coal-powered energy is honestly insane at this point. But the government's doing it. The government tried to say that they were using clean coal, which is not a thing that exists. It's going to make living standards worse because of the pollution that it causes. And that is a serious, serious form of government failure. And so the final meme that goes with this is, that's it. You people have stood in my way long enough. I'm going to Clown College to build my own gas-fired generator. So this is ScoMo looking at renewables, the private sector, climate experts, and market forces, ignoring them all, and then just creating gas-fired energy through coal. Pure insanity. But that's essentially it. So these are 4 forms of contemporary government failure. I hope this has been useful for you. It was kind of fun just to dig in on the government for 15 minutes. If you have any questions about these, feel free to leave a comment. I'm more than happy to help out. There are other examples too, so feel free to ask me questions about those. If there are any other topics you want help on, shoot me a message. I'm more than happy to record anything else. We've got like 7 weeks till the exam now, and hopefully you've been doing practice exams, etc. But these government failure questions are going to come up, and having really good contemporary examples where you can talk about how they make the allocation of resources worse is brilliant to have. On that, I hope you have a wonderful day, and I will see you next time. Goodbye.